The trial of Sean Combs moved forward. Each day brought new voices, new claims, and new tensions. The courtroom, once a place of order, became a stage for pain, for fear, and for memories that could no longer stay hidden. Jane returned to the stand, her voice steady, her eyes on the jury. She spoke of the promises Combs made, promises of love, of safety, of a future. But those promises, she said, turned to control, to violence. 2 nights she wished she could forget. She told of bruises she hid, of threats whispered late at night, of moments when she felt like property, not a person. The jury listened. The room was still. Only the sound of Jane's words filled the air. She described the so-called freak-offs, nights filled with strangers, with drugs, with cameras, nights that were planned, paid for, and hidden behind locked doors. She said she was told to smile, to go along, or face the consequences. Lawyers pushed back. They said Jane was lying, that she was bitter, that she stayed by choice, that she took money, gifts, trips, that what happened was no crime, just adults making choices. But Jane said no, it was not choice, it was survival. Outside the court, the world watched. Some believed Jane, some defended Combs, some just waited for the next headline. Inside, the judge kept order, but even he could not stop the tension from growing. Then came the tapes. The court heard voice memos. In one, Combs called Jane his crack pipe, his voice soft, his words strange. To some, it was a sign of obsession. To others, it was just talk. But in that courtroom, every word mattered. The defense tried again for mistrial. They said the government allowed lies, that witnesses changed stories, that the case was poisoned. The judge listened, and the trial went on. The courtroom saw more strange moments. A woman burst out, shouting that Diddy was being set up. Officers moved fast. The woman was taken out, but the tension stayed. The press wrote stories. The internet buzzed. Supporters and critics gathered outside. Every day felt heavier than the last. As part 2 of this story closes, the trial stands at a turning point. More witnesses wait to speak. More truths or lies will be told. The man who once filled stadiums now waits for 12 strangers to decide his fate. And the world, for now, keeps watching in silence. The trial of Sean Combs moved deeper into its long and painful journey. Each witness brought new pieces to a puzzle filled with shadows. The courtroom grew quieter with each passing day as the weight of the accusations settled over everyone inside. More voices took the stand. Former employees, former friends, people who once worked for Combs, traveled with him, stayed silent for years. Now they spoke. They told of parties that were more than parties. They spoke of nights filled with drugs, fear, and control. Spoke of women paid to stay quiet, of threats, of secret recordings. Some said they saw bruises. Some said they saw tears. Some said they were too afraid to act. The prosecution moved carefully. Step by step, they laid out their case. They showed text messages. They played recordings. They showed receipts and photos. They spoke of money sent to silence, of trips arranged to avoid the law. They said Combs ran more than a business. They said he ran a criminal empire. The defense fought back. They said the witnesses were bitter, that they wanted money, that they wanted fame, that they twisted the truth. They pointed to the gifts, the trips, the moments of joy. They said this was not a crime. This was life behind the curtain of fame. Outside the court, the world kept watching. Some people gathered with signs to support Combs. Others stood with signs for the accusers. Reporters stood in the rain, in the cold, waiting for the next piece of news. Cameras stayed pointed at the courthouse doors. Every day, a new story spread online. Every day, the world chose sides. Inside the court, the judge worked to keep order. But even he could not stop the growing sense that the trial was about more than one man. It was about fame, about power, about what happens when no one says no. There were strange moments too. People trying to pass notes to Combs, supporters shouting from the gallery, content creators filming every movement. The courthouse felt like a stage, and every person felt like a player in a drama larger than they had imagined. As Part 3 closes, the trial moves toward the heart of the case. The prosecution nears the end of its story. The defense prepares to begin its own. The man who once stood at the top of the world now sits quietly, waiting, as 12 jurors watch and listen, and prepare to decide what comes next. The trial of Sean Combs moved into its next chapter. The prosecution began to bring their final witnesses. The courtroom was heavy with silence as new stories unfolded. Stories of fear, stories of control, stories that once lived in the dark, now brought into the light. A federal agent took the stand. He spoke quietly, carefully. He described the raids on Combs's homes, the drugs they found, the weapons, the files, the items that painted a picture of a hidden life. He spoke of bank records, of payments made to women, of trips arranged. To avoid attention, the courtroom listened. The jurors took notes. The agent's words were clear. The evidence, he said, showed more than bad choices. It showed a pattern. Combs's former assistant spoke next. He talked about the years he worked for Combs, the long nights, the strange requests, the fear that grew over time. He spoke of Jane. He said he saw the bruises. He heard the fights. He said he felt trapped between loyalty and what he knew was wrong. The defense questioned them both. They asked about motives, about mistakes, about memories that might not be so clear. They pointed two gaps in the stories. They asked about money, fame, revenge. They said the case was built on bitterness, not truth. Outside, the crowds kept coming. Supporters, protesters, reporters each day brought new faces, new cameras, new signs. The courthouse steps became a place where opinions clashed. But inside, the trial went on, steady and slow. The judge worked to keep the focus on the law, but tension filled the room. Every word felt heavier. Every glance was watched. Every moment felt like part of something larger than one case. Combs sat quietly, listening, sometimes taking notes, sometimes staring straight ahead. The man who once filled arenas with sound now sat in near silence, as others spoke about his life, and as Part 4 ends, the prosecution prepares to rest its case. The defense prepares to speak. The trial stands at a turning point, and the jurors, quiet and thoughtful, hold in their hands the path forward. The trial of Sean Combs reached a new stage. The prosecution rested its case. They had said all they planned to say. They had shown their evidence. They had called their witnesses. Now it was the defense's turn. The courtroom grew quiet. The weight of the moment was clear. The defense rose to speak. They began by telling the jury that this case was not what it seemed. They said the truth was hidden behind anger, behind regret, behind greed. They said Sean Combs was not a monster. He was a man who had lived in the spotlight, a man who had made mistakes, but not crimes, not the things he stood accused of. They called their first witnesses, people who had worked with Combs, people who said they had seen kindness, generosity, hard work. They said the parties were not forced, that what happened behind closed doors was between adults who made their own choices. They said Combs did not need to force anyone, that women came to him, that people wanted to be part of his world. The defense pointed to gaps in the stories told by the prosecution's witnesses. They showed messages, photos, moments of joy. They asked the jury to see beyond the claims, to see the full picture, to remember that fame brings both fans and enemies. Outside, the crowds kept gathering. Some believed in Combs, some believed the accusers. The steps of the courthouse became a place where strangers argued, where cameras rolled, where the world watched. Inside, the trial moved carefully forward. The judge reminded the jurors to focus only on what they heard in the courtroom, to set aside the noise outside, to weigh the facts, to seek the truth. Combs sat quietly, as he had from the start, watching, listening. His future rested in the hands of 12 people he did not know, people who would soon be asked to decide his fate. As Part 5 ends, the defense continues its case. The story is not yet over. The path ahead remains unclear, and the jurors, steady and silent, keep listening. The trial of Sean Combs continued. The defense moved deeper into their case. They brought more witnesses to the stand, people who spoke of loyalty, of trust, of moments that did not match the stories told by the prosecution. A former bodyguard took the stand. He said he never saw Combs force anyone. He said the gatherings were wild, but not violent. He said the people who came to Combs's parties knew what they were choosing. He spoke of generosity, of a man who helped friends, who gave jobs, who gave second chances. Another assistant spoke next. She said Combs was strict, demanding, but not cruel. She said he was kind to those who worked hard, that he looked after his team, that she never saw him harm anyone. The defense showed photos, videos, messages, smiles at parties, laughter at events. They asked the jury to look at those moments, to see another side of the man on trial, to question the stories of fear and control. But the prosecution pushed back. On cross-examination, they asked about the things these witnesses did not see, about the nights they were not there, about the people who stayed silent out of fear. They reminded the jury that a smiling photo does not erase what happens in the dark. Outside, the tension grew. More people gathered at the courthouse steps. Some chanted for justice. Some shouted for the charges to be dropped. Cameras caught every moment. The world watched, as it had from the start. Inside, the courtroom stayed calm. The judge kept order. The jurors kept listening. Day by day, the trial moved forward, slowly, carefully, each word, each witness, adding to the picture they would soon be asked to judge. And as Part 6 ends, the defense still has more to say. The end of the trial draws near, but the final answers have not yet come. The trial of Sean Combs moved closer to its end. The defense brought more witnesses. They spoke of moments of kindness. They spoke of loyalty. They spoke of a man they said did not match the image painted by the prosecution. One witness was a longtime friend. He said Combs was generous, that he helped people in need, that he gave money quietly, without seeking praise. He said he had never seen Combs act with violence, never seen him force anyone to do anything. Another was a former business partner. He spoke of long meetings, of hard work, of dreams built from nothing. He said Combs was focused on success, not on harm. He said the man he knew could not be the man described by the accusers. The defense showed more photos, more messages, more moments of celebration. They asked the jury to look at the full picture, to see a man who rose from nothing and gave back. To his community, they said fame had made him a target, that people wanted money, that people wanted revenge. But the prosecution reminded the court of the evidence, the recordings, the payments, the raids, the drugs, the weapons, the frightened voices that filled the courtroom in earlier days. They asked the jury not to forget those details. Outside, the noise grew louder. Protesters, supporters, reporters, cameras, every day felt heavier. Every step of the trial watched by the world. Inside, the jurors listened. They watched, they waited. The judge kept the peace. The lawyers prepared for their final words, and as Part 7 ends, the defense begins to close its case. The trial nears its final days, and the decision that waits ahead will not be easy. The trial of Sean Combs entered its final phase. The defense prepared to close its case. The courtroom felt heavy with silence. Every word now seemed to carry more weight. The last of the defense witnesses took the stand. They spoke of the man they believed Combs to be, a man who lifted up those around him, a man who worked hard, who chased dreams, who gave to others. They said they had never seen him hurt anyone, never seen him force anyone, never seen the crimes he stood accused of. The defense reminded the jury of their task, to look at the facts, to see past the noise, to question the claims, to consider the gaps. They spoke of fame, of power, of how it brings friends and enemies. They said the man on trial was not perfect, but he was not guilty of these crimes. The prosecution prepared for their final words. They reminded the jury of what had been shown: the raids, the drugs, the weapons, the payments, the stories of fear, the bruises, the tears, the threats, asked the jury to remember those voices, to see the pattern, to see the truth hidden behind the glamour. Outside the court, the crowds stayed. Supporters, protesters, reporters. The world kept watching. Cameras caught every glance, every word spoken near the courthouse doors. Inside, the judge prepared to give final instructions. The lawyers prepared their closing arguments. The jurors prepared to weigh all they had heard. And as Part 8 ends, the trial stands at the edge of its end. Soon, the voices will stop, the evidence will be done, and the decision will rest in 12 quiet hands. The trial of Sean Combs reached its final days. The courtroom grew still. The defense and the prosecution stood before the jury one last time. Each side spoke carefully, each word chosen with care. This was the final chance to be heard. The prosecution spoke first. They reminded the jury of the evidence, the raids on Combs's homes, the drugs, the weapons, the payments made to silence, the threats, the fear in the voices of the witnesses, the messages, the recordings, the parties that were not parties at all. They said this was not about fame, not about mistakes. This was about crimes, about power used to harm. They asked the jury to remember the victims, to see the truth. Then the defense spoke. They told the jury to look beyond the headlines, beyond the rumors, They said the evidence did not prove guilt. They said the witnesses had reasons to lie. Money, fame, revenge. They reminded the jury of the people who spoke for Combs, people who saw kindness, generosity. They said the case was built on anger, not facts. They asked the jury for a verdict of not guilty. The judge gave his final instructions. He told the jury to consider only what they had heard in court, to weigh the evidence, to decide without fear or favor, to seek the truth as best they could. Outside, the crowd stayed. Some shouted for justice, some shouted for freedom. The cameras stayed pointed at the courthouse doors. The world waited. Inside, the jurors began their work. They returned to a quiet room. They carried the weight of all they had heard, all they had seen. They knew the decision ahead would not be easy. And as Part 9 ends, the world holds its breath. The trial is over. The waiting begins. Soon the verdict will come. The trial of Sean Combs had ended. The jury worked in silence. The courtroom waited. The world waited. The hours passed, then the days. The tension grew, but the jurors kept their thoughts hidden. Only they knew what they were thinking. Only they knew how close they were to a decision. Outside the courthouse, the crowds stayed. Reporters spoke in quiet tones. Supporters held signs. Protesters did the same. Cameras never turned away. The world stayed focused on the doors where the verdict would be heard. Then, at last, the call came. The jury had reached a decision. The courtroom filled once more. The judge took his seat. The jurors returned to their places. The air was thick. With silence, the clerk asked for the verdict. The foreperson stood, and in a voice soft but steady, the verdict was read. The words carried the weight of weeks of testimony, of evidence, of arguments, of fear, of hope. The reaction was quiet at first. Then came the whispers, the sighs, the tears, the quiet looks between the lawyers, between Combs and his team, between the accusers and their supporters. The judge thanked the jury. He released them from their duty. He reminded everyone to respect the decision to leave the courtroom in peace. Outside, the news spread in moments. The cameras caught the faces, the voices, the emotion that followed. Some cheered, some wept, some stood in silence, unsure of what to feel. Combs left the courtroom slowly, his face calm, his future now shaped by 12 strangers. The trial was over, but the story would not be forgotten. Not by the people in that room, not by the people who watched, not by the world. And so, as Part 10 ends, the case of Sean Combs moves from the courtroom to history. The world turns the page, but the questions, the memories, the truths and the doubts, they remain.